The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days, and the whole city smelled like wet concrete and rust. I was just trying to keep my mind quiet, wiping down the espresso machine for the 4th time that hour. Then the bell chimed. He stood in the doorway. He was tall, pale, and he held himself with a stillness that felt impossible, like a photograph inserted into a moving world. No shifting weight, no breath, fogging the cold air, and when I looked at the window behind him, no reflection. Then the girl walked in. She looked drugged, scared, followed by a man who stood too close, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. My instincts screamed danger. I did the only thing I could. I grabbed a marker and wrote a message on her cup. Not safe. Stay in public. I thought I was being brave. I thought I was saving her from a monster. But I made a mistake. I was so focused on saving her, I forgot about the pale man in the corner. He wasn't drinking his coffee. He was studying me. He saw that I noticed what he was. And now the thing in the corner isn't just watching anymore. He's waiting for my shift to end. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, and the city smelled like wet concrete and rust. I wiped down the espresso machine for the 4th time that hour, watching the water streak down the cafe windows in patterns that reminded me of veins. Outside, the streetlights flickered on early, casting orange pools across the slick pavement. My hands moved on autopilot, wipe, rinse, wipe again. The rhythm kept my mind quiet, which was exactly what I needed after another sleepless night. The dreams had been getting worse. Not nightmares exactly, just a persistent feeling of being watched by something that didn't blink. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up and felt my stomach drop. He stood in the doorway, water dripping from his black coat onto the worn tile floor. Tall, maybe 6'2", with hair so pale it looked silver under the fluorescent lights. But it wasn't his appearance that made my pulse spike. It was the way he stood perfectly still, like a photograph inserted into a moving world. No shifting weight, no fidgeting, no breath fogging the cold air that had followed him inside. "Coffee," he said. His voice had an accent I couldn't place, something old and careful. "Black." I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands shook slightly as I reached for a cup. The ceramic felt too solid, too real against my palms. I forced myself to focus on the familiar motions: grind, tamp, pull. The machine hissed and gurgled, filling the silence between us. He didn't look at his phone, didn't glance around the cafe, just watched me with eyes that were too pale, too steady. I'd worked customer service long enough to know when someone was looking at you versus looking through you. This was neither. This was studying. I set the cup on the counter between us, careful not to let our fingers touch. $3.50, I said. He placed exact change on the counter without breaking eye contact. His fingers were long and bloodless pale. No wedding ring, no watch, no signs of a life lived in sunlight. The bell chimed again. A girl stumbled in, maybe 22, with mascara smudged under her eyes and a jacket that didn't match the weather. She looked drunk or drugged or both, swaying slightly as she approached the counter. Behind her, a man in a leather jacket followed too closely, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching. "Latte," the girl mumbled. Her pupils were enormous, swallowing the blue of her irises. "With vanilla." The man behind her smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. My chest tightened. I'd seen this before, different faces, same dance. The girl who didn't remember how she got here. The man who seemed helpful but stood too close. The way the air felt wrong, like the moment before lightning strikes. I started making her drink, my mind racing. The pale man, Stellan, I'd heard the leather jacket guy call him earlier, though I hadn't realized they were together, had moved to a corner table. But I could feel his attention like pressure against my skin. The leather jacket man leaned against the counter. "She's with me," he said. Casual. Possessive. The girl blinked slowly, confusion swimming across her face. I ground the espresso beans harder than necessary, the noise sharp and aggressive in the quiet cafe. "Think, Oona, think." The phone was in the back room. The street outside was empty. And something about the pale man in the corner made every instinct I had scream danger. But which danger was worse? I steamed the milk, watching the girl sway. She gripped the counter for balance, and I saw the bruises on her wrist. Fresh, finger-shaped. The leather jacket man, Silas, I remembered now, pulled out his wallet. "Make it 2 lattes. We're in a hurry." My hands moved automatically, but my mind was spinning. The girl needed help, but if I called the cops, Silas would be gone before they arrived. And the pale man watching from the corner, there was something about him that made my skin crawl and my blood sing at the same time, like standing too close to a cliff edge. I grabbed a cup and a marker. My handwriting came out shaky but legible. Not safe. Stay in public. I made the drinks, my heart hammering so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Steam rose between us, obscuring Silas's face for just a moment. I placed the girl's cup directly in front of her, turning it so the message faced her. "Careful," I said, meeting her eyes. "It's hot." She looked down, blinked. Her gaze focused on the words. For 3 seconds nobody moved. Then the girl's hand shot out, grabbing the counter. "I need the bathroom," she said, her voice suddenly clearer, sharper. Silas's smile evaporated. "We really should. Now." She pushed past him, stumbling toward the restroom sign. Silas turned to me, and his expression made my blood freeze. That was stupid. The cafe felt smaller suddenly, emptier. I was aware of how thin the counter was between us, how my phone was still in the back room, how the street outside held nothing but rain and shadows. Then the pale man stood up. He didn't walk so much as materialize beside Silas, moving faster than my eyes could track. One moment he was across the room. The next his hand was on Silas's shoulder. "Leave," Stellan said quietly. Silas jerked away, but something in the pale man's face made him stop, made him go very, very still. I watched the color drain from Silas's cheeks, watched his pupils contract to pinpoints. "You don't know who you're." "I know exactly who I am." Stellan's voice was soft as silk over steel. "The question is whether you know who I am." Silas left. The bell chimed behind him, and then there was only rain and silence, and the pale man turning to look at me. "Brave," he said. "Or foolish." I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. He walked toward the counter with that same impossible stillness, and I realized what had been bothering me since he walked in. He cast no reflection in the window behind him. "The girl will be safe," he continued. "I'll see to it. But you—" He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find interesting. "You saw something in me, didn't you?" My mouth was too dry. "I don't know what you mean." "Liar." But he smiled when he said it. "You have instincts most humans have forgotten. Useful. Dangerous." He paused. "I'll be outside when your shift ends. We should talk. I'm not going anywhere with you."
"No?"
He turned toward the door, then glanced back. "Then I suppose I'll simply have to wait. I'm very patient, Oona Prentice. I've had centuries of practice." He left before I could ask how he knew my name. The girl emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, called a friend, and left safely. I cleaned the cafe in a daze, my hands shaking every time I glanced at the window. When I locked up at midnight, he was standing across the street, under a broken streetlight, rain falling around him but never quite touching his coat. I stood in the doorway, keys cutting into my palm, and made a choice that would change everything. I crossed the street. The rain stopped the moment I stepped off the curb. Not gradually, not a natural tapering. It simply ceased, as if someone had drawn an invisible line down the center of the street and declared one side dry, the other wet. I looked up. The clouds still churned overhead, dark and pregnant with moisture, but nothing fell where he stood. "You came," Stellan said. Not surprised, stating fact. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a warning I chose to ignore. "You knew my name. You knew where I worked. That's not coincidence." "No." He moved closer, and I noticed how the streetlight behind him flickered and died completely. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Oona Prentice. Ever since you stopped that man from striking his wife outside the grocery store on 15th. The memory surfaced sharp and immediate. The couple arguing. The raised hand, my body moving before my brain caught up. Stepping between them, voice steady despite the fear. That was nothing. That was instinct. His eyes caught what little light remained, reflecting it back in shades of amber and gold that shouldn't exist in human irises. Most people look away. You looked closer. You saw the violence building and moved to intercept it. Just as you did tonight with the girl, so you've been stalking me because I'm not a coward. I've been observing you because you're an anomaly." He gestured down the street, away from the cafe. "Walk with me. I promise you'll return home safely. But there are things you need to understand about what happened tonight. About what you've stepped into." Every rational cell in my body screamed to run, to go back inside, lock the door, call someone, anyone. But rationality had abandoned me the moment I'd seen his lack of reflection, the moment I'd understood, on some primal level that bypassed logic entirely, what he was. I followed him into the dark. We walked in silence for 2 blocks. The city felt different at this hour, stripped of its daytime pretense. Neon signs buzzed overhead, casting pools of sickly color across wet pavement. A cat yowled from an alley. Somewhere distant, glass shattered. Normal city sounds. But walking beside Stellan, they felt like set dressing in a play I hadn't auditioned for. "The man who threatened the girl," Stellan said finally. "Silas. He works for someone who will not appreciate my interference. You saved her life. I claimed territory that isn't mine." He turned down a narrower street, one I'd never noticed despite working in this neighborhood for 2 years. The buildings here leaned inward, their upper stories nearly touching overhead. In my world, that's a declaration of intent, a challenge. My world. The words settled in my stomach like stones. "Your world. You mean vampires." He stopped walking, turned to face me fully. In the dim light from a distant window, his features seemed carved from marble, beautiful and terrible, and utterly inhuman. "You say it so calmly." "I'm not calm." My voice shook, betraying me. "I'm terrified, but I'm also not stupid. You cast no reflection. You moved faster than physics allows. And Silas," I swallowed hard, "he was afraid of you, really, truly afraid. Not the way someone fears getting hurt. The way prey fears a predator." Stellan studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Most humans rationalize, convince themselves they saw wrong, that shadows played tricks. You accept. Would denial keep me safer? No. Something flickered across his face, almost like respect. which is why I'm taking you somewhere you'll be protected, at least until I can determine how Varric will respond. Varric, the vampire who controls this territory, Silas is one of his. By intervening, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I've complicated things. We started walking again, deeper into the maze of forgotten streets. The buildings here looked older, their facades crumbling, windows dark or boarded over, but I noticed small details that suggested life. A curtain twitching, the faint glow of candlelight behind blackout shades, the sense of eyes watching from shadows. How many of you are there? I asked. In this city? Perhaps 200. Worldwide. He shrugged, the gesture oddly human. Enough. Not as many as there once were. We're dying out, slowly. Fewer turnings, more hunters. Time itself wearing us down. You sound sad about it. I'm tired, Oona. So very tired. He stopped before a building that looked abandoned, its entrance chained and padlocked, but when he touched the lock, it fell open in his palm. I've walked this earth for 8 centuries, watched empires rise and crumble, loved and lost more times than you have heartbeats left in your life. And still, I endure. Sometimes I'm not certain whether that's blessing or curse. 8 centuries. The number was too vast to comprehend. I followed him through the door into darkness so complete it felt solid. Then light bloomed. Not electric. Candle light, dozens of candles igniting simultaneously without anyone touching them. The space revealed itself in warm, flickering increments. High ceilings, exposed brick, furniture that looked antique but immaculately maintained. Books everywhere, stacked on shelves that climbed to the rafters, piled on tables, some lying open as if recently read. This is your home. One of them. Stellan moved through the space with the ease of long familiarity, shrugging off his coat. Beneath it, he wore a simple black shirt that emphasized the sharp lines of his collarbones, the pale column of his throat. I maintain several sanctuaries throughout the city. This one is oldest, most secure. I stood just inside the doorway, suddenly aware of how completely I'd isolated myself. No one knew where I was. My phone sat in my purse, but who would I call? What would I say? A vampire brought me to his lair. Please send help. You're calculating escape routes, Stellan observed. He'd moved to a sidebar and was pouring something dark into 2 glasses. There are 3 exits. The door you entered, a window in the bedroom that leads to a fire escape, and a passage behind the bookshelf that opens to the sewers. He turned, offering me one of the glasses. But you won't need them. I don't intend to harm you. What do you intend? To keep you alive. He raised his glass in a small salute before drinking. Wine, I realized. Deep red, almost black in the candlelight. And to understand why you interest me so profoundly. I took the glass but didn't drink. I'm nobody. A barista. I live in a studio apartment with a cat named Kafka. I'm drowning in student loans from a degree I'm not using. There's nothing interesting about me. You're wrong. He settled into a leather chair that had probably been expensive when it was new, sometime around the Civil War. You have something most humans lost generations ago. A sense, an awareness of the world beneath the world. You feel us, don't you? Even before you consciously recognize what we are. I thought about the crawling sensation I'd felt when he first entered the cafe. The way my body had known to be afraid before my mind caught up. Sometimes, with certain people, I always thought it was just anxiety. It's survival instinct. Rare now. Once, all humans had it. Could sense predators, danger, death approaching. But comfort and civilization dulled it. Except in a few. He leaned forward slightly. You're one of the few, Oona, and that makes you valuable, dangerous, a liability or an asset, depending on who claims you first. No one's claiming me. Varric will try. His voice went flat, cold. When he learns you witnessed what happened tonight, when he discovers you can identify his people, sense what they are, he'll either try to turn you or kill you. Both options are unacceptable. The wine trembled in my glass. I set it down on the nearest surface before I dropped it. Why do you care? You don't know me, don't I? He stood, moving closer with that unnatural grace. I've watched you for weeks, seen how you notice the details others miss. The way you remember every regular's order, ask about their lives, make them feel seen. You're kind in a world that punishes kindness, brave when wisdom would suggest cowardice. And you have this, he reached out, stopping just short of touching my face. This light, even now, terrified and trapped, you burn with it. Life, curiosity, hope. His hand dropped. I haven't felt hope in 200 years, Oona. But watching you, I remember what it was like. What it felt like to believe the world could be better. That individual actions mattered. You make me remember being human. The confession hung between us, raw and unexpected. I should have been afraid, should have been planning escape. Instead, I found myself stepping closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. Is that why you saved the girl? Because of me? I saved her because you would have wanted me to. Because in that moment, I wanted to be the man you saw when you looked at me, not the monster I've become. I don't think you're a monster, you should. But he said it softly, almost sadly. I've killed Oona, hundreds, maybe thousands. I've fed on the innocent, the guilty, the young, the old. I've watched people I loved grow old and die while I remained unchanged. I've made choices that haunt me, committed acts I can never atone for. If you knew the things I've done, I'd probably be terrified, I interrupted. But I'd also know you're capable of change, of choosing differently. You didn't have to help tonight. You could have let Silas take her, but you didn't. That has to count for something. He stared at me like I'd spoken a language he'd forgotten. Then, so quietly, I almost missed it. You're going to destroy me. Before I could respond, before I could ask what he meant, a sound shattered the moment. A crash from somewhere below. Then voices, multiple, angry, and getting closer. Stellan's entire demeanor shifted. The contemplative, almost vulnerable creature vanished, replaced by something ancient and lethal. They're here, faster than I anticipated. Who? Varric's people. They've tracked us. He moved to the bookshelf, pressing something that made it swing open, revealing the passage he'd mentioned. Go, now. Follow the tunnel until you reach a ladder. It will take you to, I'm not leaving you. Oona, you said I have instincts. Well, my instincts are telling me not to run. I didn't understand my own certainty, only that abandoning him felt fundamentally wrong. What do you need me to do? For a moment he looked torn between fury and something that might have been admiration. Then the door exploded inward, and there was no more time for debate. 3 vampires poured into the room. I knew what they were instantly, that crawling sense amplified to screaming pitch. They moved like Stellan, too fast, too fluid, but where he radiated controlled power, they were chaos, hunger, violence barely leashed. The one in front was tall, dark-skinned, with eyes that gleamed red in the candlelight. Stellan Cross. Bold of you to poach in Varric's territory. I claimed nothing, Malachi. Stellan positioned himself between me and the intruders. The girl was being assaulted. I intervened. That's all. That's all. Malachi laughed. the sound scraping against my nerves. You humiliated one of ours, declared him unworthy, and now you hide in your sanctuary with a human witness who can identify our faces, sense our nature. Varric wants her. Surrender her, and we'll consider the debt settled. No. The word was absolute, final. It resonated through the room like a bell, and I felt the power behind it. This was the vampire king the cafe gossip had mentioned. Not the tired, melancholy creature who'd confessed his loneliness, but something far older, far more dangerous. Then we take her by force. Malachi gestured, and the other two vampires spread out, flanking. Everything happened too fast to track. Stellan moved, a blur of motion that ended with one vampire crashing through a table, wood splintering. Malachi lunged, and they collided with a sound like thunder. The third came for me. I grabbed the wine bottle from the sidebar and swung with everything I had. It connected with his temple, glass shattering, wine and something darker spattering across my hands. He staggered, more surprised than hurt, and in that moment of hesitation, Stellan was there. What followed was brutal, efficient, terrifying. Stellan fought with the precision of centuries, every movement calculated to disable, destroy. But he was outnumbered, and even I could see he was holding back, trying not to kill, trying to maintain some line he'd drawn for himself. Malachi noticed too, still clinging to your humanity. Pathetic. He had Stellan pinned against the wall, hand around his throat. Varric was right. You've gone soft. Time to put you down, old king. I didn't think, didn't plan. I just moved, grabbing a broken table leg and driving it toward Malachi's back. He caught it without looking, wrenching it from my hands and backhanding me in one smooth motion. Pain exploded across my face. I hit the floor hard, tasting copper. Stellan roared. The sound was inhuman, primal, and the temperature in the room plummeted. He tore free from Malachi's grip with strength that shouldn't have been possible, and suddenly he wasn't holding back anymore. It was over in seconds. Malachi on his knees, Stellan's hand buried in his chest. The other two vampires unconscious or dead, I couldn't tell. And Stellan's eyes, when he looked at me, were completely black, bottomless, ancient. Leave, he said to Malachi, voice like gravel. Tell Varric if he wants war, I'll give him war. But the girl is under my protection. Mine, touch her, and I'll burn his entire line to ash. He withdrew his hand. Malachi collapsed, gasping, then fled with his companions, dragging them through the broken door. Silence crashed down. Stellan stood in the wreckage of his sanctuary, chest heaving with breaths he didn't need, covered in blood that wasn't his. Slowly, the blackness receded from his eyes, replaced by amber, by horror at what he'd done. Oona. He started toward me, then stopped, looking at his hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to see. You saved me. I pushed myself up, ignoring the throbbing in my jaw. I lost control. I could have killed them. Nearly did. But you didn't. I crossed the space between us, glass crunching under my feet. You stopped. You chose mercy. Because of you. He reached out, fingertips barely grazing my bruised cheek. His touch was cool, gentle. You make me want to be better than I am, and that's dangerous for both of us. I don't care. You should. But he didn't pull away. Varric won't stop. I've declared you mine, and in our world, that's binding. Permanent. You're marked now, Oona. Connected to me. To this life. There's no going back. Then I guess we move forward. He laughed, the sound broken and beautiful. You're insane. Probably. I was shaking, adrenaline crashing through me in waves. But I'm also alive, because of you. So what happens now? Now. He finally touched me properly, hand cupping my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. Now I teach you how to survive in the dark, how to sense danger before it strikes, how to protect yourself from creatures like me. His expression softened, and I pray I haven't damned you by caring. Maybe I'm damning you by caring back. Maybe we're damning each other. He leaned closer, and I could smell wine and smoke, and something indefinable, something that made my pulse race for entirely different reasons. Would that be so terrible? I was about to answer when the window exploded inward, and a voice I didn't recognize filled the room. How touching! The fallen king and his pet human. A figure dropped through the shattered glass, landing in a crouch. Varric sends his regards, Stellan, and his claim. The girl belongs to our territory. Surrender her, or we take her. And you, both. More vampires poured through the window, through the broken door. Too many. Far too many. Stellan pulled me behind him, but I could feel his tension. We were surrounded, outnumbered, and this time there would be no mercy. Last chance, the vampire said, and I finally saw his face. Sharp features, cold eyes, a smile that promised pain. Give us the girl. Stellan's hand found mine, squeezed once. Run, he whispered. But before I could move, before either of us could react, someone grabbed me from behind, yanking me backward through the secret passage. The bookshelf slammed shut, cutting off Stellan's shout of rage. I was dragged through darkness, struggling, screaming his name. But whoever held me was impossibly strong, and within seconds we were in the tunnels, moving fast. Stop fighting, a female voice hissed. I'm saving your life, you idiot. Let me go. Stellan is buying you time. Don't waste it. She hauled me up a ladder, through a grate, into an alley I didn't recognize. Rain had started again, cold and merciless. I finally saw my captor. A woman, maybe 30, with silver hair and eyes that marked her as vampire. But something in her face, her expression, seemed almost concerned. Who are you? Someone who owes Stellan a debt. She released me, stepping back. He called in that debt tonight, made me promise to get you out if things went wrong. So here we are. I have to go back. He's fighting for his life, and he'll lose if you return. Varric wants you as leverage. As long as you're free, Stellan has a chance. She pulled out a phone, thrust it at me. Call someone. Go somewhere public. Stay alive. That's what he wants. I can't just leave him. You can. You will. Her expression softened slightly. He cares about you, human. More than he's cared about anything in decades. Don't make his sacrifice meaningless. She vanished before I could respond, leaving me alone in the rain with a stranger's phone and the taste of blood in my mouth. I stood there, shaking, torn between running back and running away. Behind me, somewhere in that building, Stellan was fighting, maybe dying, because of me. The phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Trust, Lyra. Stay hidden. I'll find you. ES. Then another. I'm sorry. And a third, as sirens began to wail in the distance. Whatever happens, know that you changed everything. The phone went dark. I was alone in the rain, the night pressing close. And somewhere behind me, the vampire who'd made me believe in impossible things was facing an army. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until the rain soaked through my clothes and my legs trembled. Then I stopped. Stood there on the empty sidewalk, water streaming down my face, and realized I was running in the wrong direction. Away from him. away from the only person who'd ever looked at me like I mattered, who'd trusted me with his secrets, his loneliness, his carefully guarded hope. The phone was still clutched in my hand, his messages glowing on the screen. "I'm sorry. Whatever happens, know that you changed everything." Like goodbye. Like he'd already decided how this ended. My fingers tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. No, I'd spent my whole life watching from the sidelines, safe and invisible. I'd let fear make every choice for me. Not tonight. Not when it mattered. I turned back toward the warehouse. The rain had eased to a drizzle by the time I reached the building again. The sirens had faded. No more sounds of fighting from inside. Just silence, thick and waiting. The door Lyra had shoved me through hung open, darkness beyond. I stepped inside. The hallway stretched ahead, lit by flickering fluorescence that cast everything in sickly yellow. My footsteps echoed too loud. Water dripped from my hair, my clothes. I followed the corridor toward voices, toward light bleeding from beneath a door at the end. My hand touched the door handle. Cold metal against my palm. I could still turn around. Still choose safety. I pushed it open. The room beyond was vast, industrial, old factory floor, maybe, concrete and steel beams and shadows that seemed to breathe. Stellan stood in the center, surrounded. 5 vampires circled him like wolves. Blood streaked his face, his shirt torn, but he was standing, alive. And Varric stood opposite him, perfectly composed in an expensive suit, not a hair out of place. "Oona." Stellan's voice cracked on my name. His eyes found mine across the space, and something in them broke. "No, you need to. She needs to stay exactly where she is." Varric's voice was smooth, cultured. He didn't turn to look at me. How touching. The pet returns to her master. I walked forward. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I kept moving until I stood beside Stellan, close enough to feel the tension radiating from him, the barely controlled violence. "I'm not his pet." My voice was steadier than I expected. "And he's not my master." "No." Varric finally looked at me. His eyes were pale blue, cold as winter sky. "Then what are you doing here, little human? This is vampire business. Ancient business. You're nothing but collateral damage." "She's leaving." Stellan's hand found my arm, tried to pull me back. "Oona, please." "I'm not." I pulled free, stepped forward instead, toward Varric, toward danger. "You want leverage. Here I am. But you don't get to hurt him anymore." Varric laughed. The sound echoed off concrete walls, wrong and hollow. "Hurt him, child. I'm trying to save him from himself. From this pathetic weakness." He gestured at me dismissively. He was a king, feared, respected. Now look at him, reduced to playing house with a barista. "I chose this." Stellan's voice was low, dangerous. "I chose her. You chose extinction." Varric moved closer, circling us both now. His guards shifted with him, maintaining their positions. "Our kind survives by staying separate, superior. You've forgotten that. Let yourself become soft." The air grew heavier. Static prickled across my skin. I could feel Stellan beside me, coiled tight, ready to strike. But outnumbered, wounded. If this turned into a fight, he'd lose. "You're afraid." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Varric stopped moving, turned those cold eyes fully on me. "Excuse me, you're afraid of what he represents." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept talking. "Change. Evolution. The possibility that your way isn't the only way anymore. That maybe isolation isn't strength. It's just loneliness. Oona. Stellan's voice held a warning. But I couldn't stop. The words poured out. Everything I'd observed, everything I'd learned watching people from behind my counter for years. You came here with 5 guards. For one vampire. That's not confidence. That's fear. You're terrified that if Stellan proves you can have both power and connection, your whole worldview collapses. Varric moved so fast, I didn't see it. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next his hand was around my throat, lifting me off the ground. My feet kicked air. Pressure crushed my windpipe. You know nothing about our world. His breath was cold against my face. About what we are, what we must be to survive. Darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. But I could see Stellan behind Varric, see the absolute fury in his eyes, the way shadows seemed to gather around him like living things. Let her go. Each word from Stellan's mouth carried weight. Power. The fluorescent lights flickered. Cracks spider-webbed across the concrete floor. Or what? Varric's grip tightened. You'll fight me, kill me. You're outnumbered and weakened. The moment you move, my people tear you apart. And she dies anyway. My vision was going dark, but I could still see Stellan's face. Could see him calculating, weighing options, preparing to sacrifice himself. No, I stopped struggling. Let my body go limp in Varric's grip. His hold loosened slightly, just enough. I sucked in half a breath and whispered, "He's not alone." Varric's eyes narrowed. "What?" "Look around." I forced the words past my crushed throat. "Your guards, they're not moving." It was true. The 5 vampires who'd been circling us stood frozen, watching, not attacking, just watching. Varric glanced back. Uncertainty flickered across his face for the first time. "They know." Stellan's voice was calmer now, certain. "They've known for weeks that I'm not trying to destroy our way of life, just evolve it. And they're tired, Varric. Tired of fear, tired of hiding, tired of pretending strength and isolation are the same thing." But Varric's grip on my throat had loosened further. "Test it." Stellan moved closer, each step deliberate. "Order them to attack. See if they obey." Silence stretched. Varric's hand trembled against my neck. Then he released me. I dropped, gasping, knees hitting concrete. Stellan was there instantly, catching me, pulling me close. "You would challenge me." Varric's voice shook with rage. "For this, for her, I would challenge you for the right to choose my own path." Stellan's arms tightened around me. "Something you've denied us all for centuries. But I'm not asking permission anymore." Varric looked at his guards. "Kill them both." No one moved. One of the vampires, a woman with dark hair, stepped forward instead. "No, we're done, Varric. This ends tonight. Traitors." Varric's composure finally cracked. "All of you. I made you, gave you purpose, power. You gave us a cage." The woman's voice was sad. "Stellan's offering a door." Varric stared at them, at Stellan, at me. Something ancient and terrible moved behind his eyes. Then he laughed, bitter and broken. "Fine. Keep your pet. Build your pathetic new world. But when it crumbles, when she grows old and dies and leaves you alone again, remember I warned you." He turned toward the exit. Paused. "You'll regret this, Stellan. Love makes us weak." "No." Stellan's voice followed him. "Fear does." Varric left. His footsteps echoed away down the corridor. The remaining vampires looked at each other, then at Stellan. The dark-haired woman nodded once, respect in her eyes, and they followed Varric out. Then we were alone. Stellan's arms were still around me, holding me like he was afraid I'd disappear. I could feel him shaking. You came back, you ran, and then you came back. Of course I did. I pulled back enough to see his face. Blood still streaked his cheek. I reached up, wiped it away with my thumb. Did you really think I'd leave you? I hoped you would. Prayed you would. His hand covered mine, pressed it against his face. You could have been safe. I don't want safe. The truth of it settled in my chest, solid and sure. I want this, you. Whatever comes with it. He kissed me then, desperate and gentle and tasting of blood and rain. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. You're insane. Probably. I smiled. But so are you. We should leave. Find somewhere secure. Varric won't give up that easily. I know. But neither of us moved. Just stood there in the empty warehouse, holding each other, alive. Outside dawn was coming. I could feel it in the air, that subtle shift toward morning. Stellan felt it too. His body tensed. Come on. I took his hand. Let's go home. We walked out together into the last of the night. The rain had stopped. Stars showed through breaking clouds. My hand in his fingers laced through mine. The city was waking around us, oblivious to what had just happened, to what had changed. At the corner, Stellan stopped, looked down at me. You understand what this means, what you've chosen. I chose you. I squeezed his hand. Everything else we'll figure out together. He smiled then, real and unguarded. The loneliness I'd first seen in him at the cafe was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. We disappeared into the city as the sun touched the horizon, two shadows becoming one, walking toward whatever came next. And for the first time in my careful, invisible life, I wasn't afraid.